Hey there everybody, this is Thomas Smith from Newton's Third Tutoring. Today we're going to go over the quadratic formula. For all of you in college algebra, the quadratic formula is a method to solve for a second order polynomial. So the quadratic formula is fairly simple, and it's typically used to get two answers that will satisfy the equation for the second order polynomial here. So here we've got two equations we're going to go ahead and solve for, A and B. We'll be able to do a couple different things in factoring and simplifying the equation B when we go ahead and solve for the solutions for that. So starting with the quadratic formula, this is what the quadratic formula looks like. So it's x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So some teachers put it to a jingle and you're able to kind of remember it, whatever works for you. This is a very powerful equation. Again, you'll see that you'll get two answers when you solve for this equation. As you can see by the plus minus sign there, you'll get two answers. Each plugged into the equation will satisfy and give you an answer of 0. So sometimes the quadratic or a second order polynomial will have not just a 0 on the other side. In those cases, in a separate video, I can talk about how to solve for that. So we'll go ahead and look at the first one. As you can see, x squared plus 10x minus 3 equals 0. You can see these variables here. In front of the x squared, there's no variable. Typically, that's just a 1. That's just implied when there's no number in front of the x squared. It's usually just a 1. And then each of these variables, they are corresponding to different variables in the quadratic formula, a, b, and c. And you can see in c, the c variable, there's a negative sign there, negative 3. So it's easy to overlook the minus sign and just put a 3 there. You want to make sure that you account for that minus sign. It's very important because that can give you a different result if you ignore it. So we'll go ahead and plug these numbers in to the quadratic formula. Again, each number in front of the variable corresponds to a letter in the quadratic formula. So here we'll have x equals minus 10 plus or minus square root of 10 squared minus 4 times negative 3 all over 2 times 1. And again, these numbers are plugged into the quadratic formula corresponding to the variables. So we'll go ahead and simplify this and get minus 10 plus or minus 100, a square root of 100, and then a minus 4 times minus 3 gives you a positive 12, and that's all divided by 2. So further simplifying this will give us minus 10 plus or minus 112 divided by 2. So this gives us two answers here because of the plus minus, the first of which will be a minus 10 plus square root of 112 divided by 2. And then the other will be a minus 10 minus square root of 112 divided by 2. You can further simplify this, but effectively plug either of these answers into equation A and you will get 0. And that's what this formula does. It solves for x. So these are your two answers for equation A, as shown above. Equation B is a little bit different. We have a variable in front of the x squared. So we're going to go ahead and see how we can attack that and solve for that. So we'll go ahead and write this equation out again. So it's 5 x squared minus 10x plus 20 equals 0. So again, the variable in front of the x squared is, there's a 5 there. You can go ahead and plug that into the quadratic formula for a, but we'll go ahead and divide every number by 5. It simplifies the equation a little bit more and makes the math a little bit easier when you're crunching the numbers on the quadratic formula. So you have to make sure you divide every number, every variable by 5, and it'll simplify to x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. So as you can see, the numbers are a little bit easier to work with here when you do that. And again, we have each of these variables corresponding to a, b, or c in the quadratic formula. Again, don't forget the minus sign on the minus 2 for the variable b, as well as a, there's a 1 there. So let's not forget that. So we'll go ahead and plug these numbers in. We get x equals, and that is a minus times a minus 2, so that'll give us a positive number, plus or minus the square root of minus 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 4, all divided by 2a, and again, a is 1. So we'll simplify this further. We'll get a positive 2 plus or minus the square root. Minus 2 squared is 4, and that's minus 4 times 4, which is 16, all divided by 2. You can see that under the square root, we're going to end up getting a negative sign here. So we'll get 2 plus or minus. It'll be a minus 12 here. And so when you're working with negatives underneath the square root, we can go over that in a separate video. You'll deal with imaginary numbers. Factoring out the negative would pretty much be using the imaginary number I, which is equal to the square root of minus 1. We can go over that in a separate video. For the purposes of this video, we'll go ahead and just leave the negative there. And it'll still give us and satisfy the equation. So our two answers, we'll do x equals 2 plus minus 12 divided by 2. And again, 2 minus square root of minus 12 divided by 2. And these are your answers, which will satisfy the quadratic formula. Well, this has been our video tutorial on the quadratic formula. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. And our website is at www.newtonsthirdtutoring.com. If you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to see a video on a topic, feel free to shoot us an email at newtonsthirdtutoring@gmail.com. Thanks. This is Thomas Smith, and I'm signing off.